My name is Bruce Walker. I'm a professor in the business school at MU. I'm also president of Centennial Investors, which is the angel investing organization in mid-Missouri. And our group of members provides early stage funding for startup enterprises. So we do that not only as an investment, but we do that hopefully to contribute to the vitality of new enterprises. It's my pleasure today to introduce Chris Chung, who's the CEO of the Missouri Partnership. His bio is on page 5 in your program, so I won't repeat that, but I would like to highlight a couple points. Chris joined the Missouri Partnership in the year 2007. The Missouri Partnership is a public-private, nonprofit organization. And specifically, Chris directs, well, he has many responsibilities, including the partnership's efforts to market Missouri for new business investment and also to recruit new corporate operations to the state. And been very successful. Missouri Partnership's been very successful in that regard, having helped to recruit more than $300 million in new annual payroll and $700 million of investment in our state. So please join me in welcoming Chris Chung.
Good morning, everyone. Chris Chung with the Missouri Partnership. First off, I just want to say it is a real honor and privilege to be here today. I get the privilege of giving a lot of presentations and speaking engagements, both inside Missouri and outside Missouri. And this one, I have to admit, is probably one of the most humbling, simply because of the great things that you're all doing with respect to trying to figure out how to start your own businesses, how to become better entrepreneurs, how to launch ideas that will hopefully transform your community, your state, the world. I see a lot of that in this audience today, and I also see the people who are mentoring, coaching, and teaching all of you as you become further engaged on this path. So, as I said, it was a bit daunting to come up here today, and in spite of the fact that I've had a lot of experience giving presentations, this is actually one that I was a little bit nervous about. So I hope you'll indulge me your attention today. For the next 20 minutes, I want to hopefully provide a little bit of information that helps you understand the theme of what we're here to talk about. Your program today, Binding Education and Economic Development Through Entrepreneurship, I want to speak a little bit about what economic development is. It's a concept that you're all probably hearing throughout the course of today, but also in the media, also from the mouths of elected officials, also from presidential campaigns. All these types of things, you hear the term economic development. I hope to shed a little bit of light today on what that is and how it's done here in the state of Missouri. So the title of my presentation, and this is a very different presentation than I ever typically give to audiences I speak to, but strangers in a field. Who are they and why do we want more of them in Missouri? And that may seem a little bit curious. Hopefully people will understand by the end of today's session what I'm actually referring to. But when I think of strangers in a field, over the course of 16 years in the economic development profession, every time I see a gathering of folks who are in suits looking out on a field, that's what economic development is. What they're doing is they're standing out there taking a look at something that isn't there today. They're trying to visualize something. It could be a new building, it could be a new office, it could be something that doesn't exist today that they'll be giving birth to through the process of economic development that will hopefully put people to work, create jobs, create investment in communities. And so that's a good thing to me, and it always has been over the course of my 16-year career in economic development. But before I spend any further time on that analogy, I'm going to dive just a little deeper into what exactly I'm talking about. So what is economic development? It's a term that hopefully most of you have heard of. If anything, maybe when your mayor's running for office in your hometown, when you hear a governor running for office, even when you hear presidents talk, they throw out this word economic development or job creation or something like that. I fly a lot, travel a lot for work, and often try to strike up conversations with people next to me on the plane, and a lot of them may not know what economic development is. It is a word that, a term that maybe passes over people's heads if they aren't engaged. So if anything, I want people to kind of leave this next 20 minutes with an understanding of what exactly economic is and what it represents to communities and states. But what exactly is it? Economic development, the reason I have a picture of a stool here is I like to use the analogy that economic development is really about a three-legged stool. And it's a stool that supports the economic growth and vitality of a specific community, a region, a state, a country. But what are the three legs of that stool? First and foremost is what are we doing as a state here in Missouri, and I'm guessing most folks are here from Missouri, what are we doing as a state to support the companies who are already here today? The companies that are in our backyard, already employing people, already contributing tax base to their communities, to their state, and putting a lot of people to work. That's the first leg of the stool. Any of you who are running businesses already today, that analogy is no different than the importance of what it means to take care of your existing customers. Most of your sales, they're going to come from your existing customers, and you know that you've got to take care of those folks first. States are no different. Our customers as a state, those are the many businesses and companies who have already chosen to invest and create jobs in Missouri, and we want to make sure we're taking care of them. So that's the first leg of the stool. The second leg of the stool is what you're all representing here today, which is what is a state like Missouri, or any of those states across the country, what are they doing to foster a climate and create a set of resources where you, with an idea of creating a business, can take that idea and turn it into a successful company that will employ one person in a year, maybe 3 people in 5 years, maybe if you're really fortunate and successful, it'll create 1,000 people, 1,000 jobs in 10 years. What are states doing to foster that climate where those types of ideas can be taken from the garage, from the basement, from a research laboratory at a university, and turned into a successful commercial enterprise? Because again, what we're trying to do is create jobs. Then the third leg of the stool is what I'm going to spend a little bit of time today talking about, which is what are we doing to attract new companies, new economic blood here to the state of Missouri that will also put people to work, cause investment in communities, and elevate the overall economic well-being of the state of Missouri and the people who live here. That's what economic development is. But why is it important? Why does that matter? We've got these 3 legs of the stool. What exactly are they propping up? Here in the state of Missouri, we're at a 5.9% unemployment rate. That's great. That's the lowest unemployment rate that this state has been at in 5 years now. But 5.9% still means that there are 176,000 people without a job who want one. 176,000 people. These could be your neighbors. These could be friends of your parents. These could be other people you know in your community who, in spite of wanting to work, cannot find an opportunity to put their skills and experience to work. And that's ultimately what the purpose of economic development is, which is to create those types of opportunities. It could be through helping existing companies who are already here in Missouri to grow and keep hiring. It could be helping all of you to launch your ideas successfully so that you can also create jobs through the people that you hire to your businesses. And then, of course, it could be attracting new companies here to Missouri that aren't here today. Those are the 3 legs of the stool, and that's why they're important. But I'm going to spend just the next few minutes talking about one leg of that stool, which is specifically what my organization focuses on. But before I do that, let me talk about the customers that we're dealing with as an organization. We're an organization that, as you heard earlier, we're responsible for marketing and promoting Missouri as a place to do business. So what is Missouri as a place to do business? It's 70,000 square miles, everywhere from Joplin to Palmyra to the Boot Heel to St. Joseph and any and all points in between. That's what our product is, but our product is also the workforce that we have in Missouri, that great Midwestern work ethic that knows how to show up and give an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. Our product is also our business climate, our energy costs, our tax rates, our educational systems, our transportation network. All of these things make up the product that we're trying to sell and promote outside Missouri as a great place to do business. It's not a product that fits in a box or on a shelf. It's an intangible product made up of many, many different things that we're trying to promote to a specific audience. And who is that audience? Well, let me take a couple minutes just to describe that. So how does this all work? You all, as future business leaders, you're going to be successful in launching your own businesses and companies. And one day, you're going to decide that you've outgrown where you are, and you need to expand, and you need to find somewhere new to launch your operations. You're going to decide you need to build a new factory, set up a new call center, build a new office, whatever that is, you're going to need something new to get your company growing again. And so you're going to decide that there's going to be some number of places that you're willing to look. You might look just here in Missouri, that's certainly my hope, but you might decide to look in many different places. Well, that's the kind of company that we're dealing with often. We're dealing with companies that have a pretty wide range of flexibility with respect to where they decide to expand and locate. And we're trying to compete for the jobs and investment that they're planning to create when they decide to set up this new operation. And so we're essentially on the front lines, if you will, of trying to convince these companies that they need to take a look at Missouri, and then they need to select our state as the place where they choose to expand and locate. But what matters to companies? What matters to these people? They could be CEOs, they could be company presidents, they could be owners of their businesses. What are the things that are going to drive their decision on where they decide to put their locations and where they decide to create jobs and hire employees? Well, these three things are probably what matter the most. And these are the types of things that we're trying to do with respect to getting Missouri on the radar screens of companies who are looking. Talent, first and foremost. That's a big part. You think about a company like Facebook. Facebook needs to go where they can find computer talent, network engineering talent, whatever that sort of information technology skill set they need to grow and expand their business. They're going to be very sensitive to where they decide to go based on where the talent is that they're trying to hire and add to their company. That's one type of company. There's also companies that are very sensitive to geography. And by geography, I mean physical location. Location still matters for a lot of companies. You think about Amazon. All of you, I'm sure, have ordered products off of Amazon. Amazon builds million-square-foot distribution centers all over the country, all over the world. And to give you some idea, if you've never been through one of these things, 1 million square feet is roughly 20 football fields, all under one roof, filled with the kinds of products that we all purchase from a company like Amazon every day. And for them, they're trying to put these big warehouses wherever they think that the customers are that they're trying to supply from that particular warehouse. So that's a good example of a company that's going to be very dependent on physical location, driving their decision on where to go. And then cost is probably the last thing. Apple's a great example. Apple makes stuff, or rather they hire people to make stuff. The iPhones, the iPads, they used to make iPods. I'm not sure if they even sell those anymore. But all of these different things, these depend on a low cost of production. And so for them, they're going to be very sensitive on what the costs are to establish something like manufacturing. That could be the cost of labor, that could be the cost of energy, that could be taxes, that could be a number of different things that make up their cost equation. So either way, these are the sorts of things that matter to companies, and this is how we're trying to tailor our message about Missouri as an attractive place to do business, to try to hit on what matters to the types of companies that we are competing to get their investment and jobs here in the state. So let me backtrack. Who are we? As you heard in the introduction, we're an organization that was formed just a short 6 years ago. I have my own story as an entrepreneur, if you will, because I was hired as the first chief executive of this organization when it was formed 6 years ago. I'm from Ohio. It's where I was born and raised. Moved here to Missouri without ever having set foot in the state before interviewing for this position. That's a separate story for a different time, but suffice it to say, when we started this organization, we were brand new. We had funding in the bank and we had a board of directors, but that's it. All of the hiring, all of the staffing up, everything had to be built to construct what I'm talking about here today. But like as I said, that's a separate story for a different time. But the reason I bring that up is this organization was formed 6 years ago specifically with this mission of trying to go out there and aggressively promote Missouri as a place to do business and try to attract companies to come here. So that's who we are. What is our strategy? How do you market a state? We get that question a lot. As I said, this is a product that you can't really easily define. Doesn't fit in a box, doesn't go on a shelf. It's the sum total of a lot of different parts that may matter to the right companies who are looking. Really, for us, it's about three different things. One is we are constantly trying to raise the image and improve the perception of Missouri as a place to do business. I live in Missouri now, obviously, but I run into plenty of people who have no idea where Missouri is, let alone what we have to offer as a place to do business. Many of you who have friends outside Missouri, you may run into the same problem. That's why we always start with our presentations with a picture of where exactly Missouri is in the country. We certainly do that with companies who are overseas, but let alone, we sometimes have to do that with companies right here in the United States. It's not always a given that people know where we are here in Missouri, but simply raising the awareness of Missouri is the first step. But we also have to make sure that people aren't just aware of the product that we're marketing, we have to make sure that they think of it in favorable ways. So for us, a lot of our strategy is also about how do we elevate the perception that company executives and business owners have of our state as a place to do business, because it's going to be very, very difficult for us to persuade them to invest and create jobs in Missouri if they don't even have a very favorable opinion of what we have to offer as a state. So that's the first thing, product awareness and product perception. The second is about relationships. Ultimately, what we're doing is we are selling a product. Just like many of you who have ideas, you're trying to sell a product. And for us, that sales process means we've got to form relationships with the people who are making and influencing decisions on where their companies are going to expand. So that's a big part of our strategy on how we go out there and market Missouri as a place to do business as well. And then the last piece of it is what we call product development. We spend $3 million a year in our efforts to market Missouri as a place to do business. Some states spend more, some spend less. Here in Missouri, that costs us about $3 million a year to go out there and promote this state as a place where companies will want to come, expand, and create jobs. But if we don't have a great product to offer, if we don't have a workforce that's educated, if we don't have a transportation system that's modern enough to move people and products, if we don't have a cost of energy or a tax system or a regulatory climate that's friendly to businesses and allows them to continue growing without high cost and unnecessary regulation, it's going to be very difficult for us to convince companies to come here and take a look. So we've always got to make sure that we've got a great product, because we could spend 10 times $3 million a year, and if we never have a good product to put out there, we're going to be somewhat limited in our success. But that's our strategy of how we promote this state for doing business. Where are the projects coming from? Who are the kinds of companies we are talking to on a regular basis? These are companies that come from the US. These are companies that come from Europe, Canada, Asia. There are all sorts of companies at any given time who are deciding where they're going to expand next. It's usually something where they've got to add a new product, they've got to add a new service, they have to decide where in the world they're going to do this from. And so our job, as you hopefully understand, is our job is try to convince them that Missouri is the place where they want to be doing this from, because we've got a great workforce, because we've got a great tax climate, because we are the best place for whatever reason is important to them for them to put their operations here. But this is just a good example. This is a graph, and it's tough to see if you're in the back, so I'll just summarize it for you. This just shows the trend in investment coming from China to the United States. We often hear about companies that have outsourced or offshored and they've moved their production to China. But the reality is there's plenty of investment coming in the reverse direction. There are Chinese companies who, as they continue to grow globally, they're going to be interested in having operations here in the United States because, frankly, this is the best market in the world to be in, economically speaking. And Chinese companies know this, and they continue to put steady streams of investment here into the US in the form of new factories, new offices, new centers of employment that will put people to work somewhere in the United States. And what we want is for that somewhere in the United States to be right here in Missouri. So what are our deliverables? We're a sales organization at the end of the day. It's about having a full pipeline. Any of you who are starting or running your own businesses, you know the importance of the pipeline. It's about creating opportunities to sell your product to your customer. And for us, we have a lot of conversations out there with companies who are just beginning to think about where they're going to locate their new operations. And our job is to continue working with these companies and increasing the interest that they have in Missouri to the point where hopefully someday on the horizon, those companies decide, at least some of those companies decide, to build their facilities and establish their operations here in the state of Missouri. That's ultimately what our investors expect from us, our public sector investors as well as our private sector investors. That's the outcome that they want us. Way off on the horizon is those companies that decide to come here to Missouri, create jobs, and make investment in our communities. So what are our odds? Our odds aren't exactly as low as getting struck by lightning, but as you can imagine, this is a competitive business. There are 49 other states in this country who are doing something similar to this, who are trying to distinguish themselves to this audience of companies who are growing and expanding, trying to make the very same case we are, that their state is the best possible place for a company to come, create jobs, and expand. So you can imagine, not only are we facing the competition from our neighboring states like Kansas and Illinois, but frankly, the competition is coming from the rest of the US and sometimes from other parts of the globe. So it's not as rare as this that we're successful in eventually convincing those companies to come here, but it's a pretty fierce competition. What are some of our results? Just in the past few years, this organization has been part of efforts to attract 58 new corporate locations to the state, resulting in job creation of more than 6,700 jobs, $350 million in new annual payroll. That's money that gets earned by people here in Missouri and spent in the local economy, and more than $750 million in new capital investment. That's buildings, that's equipment, that's all types of physical assets that are being spent on money that, again, circulates back within the economy here in the state. This is something we're proud of, but as you can see, there's still 176,000 people who are still searching for work here in the state of Missouri. So this is but a small drop in the bucket, but it's a drop in the bucket that we can affect as an organization. So what are our challenges? Moving forward, when we're promoting Missouri, marketing Missouri as a place to do business, what are the roadblocks that we continue to face in this mission? As I said, the first one is simply awareness of our product. We spend plenty of time just making people aware of where Missouri is and what we have to offer as a business location. And if you've ever tried to explain to someone who has zero clue about where Missouri is, you certainly can sympathize with the challenges of helping someone understand where exactly we are. It doesn't help that there's 7 other states that begin with the letter M: Maryland, Minnesota, Montana, you name it. We've probably been confused with all of these states. So that doesn't help. Product perception is the next thing. Again, it's not enough that people know about Missouri. They've got to be in a position where they're thinking favorably about this state, or we're not going to get a very good chance of being looked at when that company is getting ready to expand. I like to draw an example to something that happened in 2011. I call it franchise taxes versus F4s. And let me explain. So franchise tax, some of you may know what this is. I don't expect most of you to, but this is a tax that Missouri used to levy on businesses. It was a tax that, again, if you're a business owner, you had to pay for it, you had to file it, but it was really more of a nuisance, and it didn't really generate that much in collections for the state of Missouri. So it's one of those taxes that people will agree really is better off just being eliminated altogether. And so Missouri did do that 3 years ago. They decided to say, let's get rid of this tax. It'll be better for businesses. That's a great thing. When you're someone in my position, you want to be able to talk about how your state is cutting taxes and getting rid of some of these extra costs to businesses because it makes the state seem like a more friendly place for businesses to come. If I had my choice, that would have been the lead story in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times about Missouri cutting its franchise tax that week. That would have been my dream. For someone who markets Missouri, that's a fantastic thing. Unfortunately, 3 days after this happened in Missouri, a tornado smacked into the airport in St. Louis. That's a pretty big story, as you can imagine. When a tornado hits an airport, that's not the sort of thing that you want someone to hear about when they're living outside of Missouri. So that, it's not a great thing, assure me. You know, it doesn't speak well to things like natural disaster risks that companies are also concerned about. So that illustrates the constant issue or challenge of the perception that companies have of our product. We always need to try to make sure that companies are seeing our product as competitively as possible, but there are a lot of things outside our control which may influence how that product is seen. So that's a challenge. And then, as I said, the last thing is product versus packaging. We spend $3 million a year on promoting this product. We have to make sure that it's always as competitive as possible, be that the workforce, our tax system, our regulatory climate. These things all make up that product, and if our product isn't fundamentally competitive, as I said, we can spend a whole lot more than $3 million a year, and we'd be very limited in our success. At the same time, we could have the best product in the world. All of you as entrepreneurs, you could have the best product or service in the world, but if you aren't spending a penny on marketing and advertising that product to your audience, how likely is it to sell? It's the same thing here in Missouri. I believe we've got a fantastic business climate, and we have a great product to offer to companies who are in a position to grow. But if we aren't spending anything on telling that story, we can't just expect that the phone's going to ring off the hook. It doesn't work that way. All of you who have started businesses and sell products, you know you've got to invest in telling the story of your product. So let me wrap up here with a couple of things. How can you help? I'm deputizing all of you. You're all going to be helping the Missouri Partnership tell the story, because I want each of you in your capacities. I presume you live here in Missouri. I don't know if anyone else lives in like Kansas. If so, I'll speak slower. Sorry. Just kidding. How can you help? Well, you're all going to be ambassadors of your communities and of this state. We've heard a lot of great stories. This is the first time I've heard Lauren speak about her company, LaQuist, but I'm familiar with the Stansberry twins who spoke here last year about their product. And any single one of you who are launching products or have ideas of businesses that you're starting, you're all ambassadors for Missouri, whether you know it or not. You have the ability and the power to affect the perception and awareness of what Missouri has to offer, not just as a place to do business, but as a place to live, as a place to work, as a place to play. That is a very powerful sphere of influence that you all have. And so when I say that I'm deputizing you, I'm only half joking, because I want you all to spread the word about what Missouri is and what it has to offer to companies and businesses who want to build their success anywhere in the world. They can do it right here in Missouri. And so let me help you with a few talking points if you're interested in taking on this mission of spreading the word about Missouri. And again, it's tough to see. I'll rattle a few off of these. But we're one of the top 10 states for doing business. We have one of the top 10 best regulatory climates, which means we're not a state that's going to get in the way of companies who are interested in expanding or growing. And believe it or not, there's plenty of states that unfortunately are set up in a way that doesn't make it the easiest on their businesses there. We have one of the top 10 transportation systems in the country. We know how to move products and people efficiently and effectively. We're one of the top 10 lowest places for business energy costs. And if you're making stuff, if you're manufacturing, the cost of energy is definitely something you're going to be thinking about. We're one of the most diverse economies in the US. We were a top state for technology job growth in both 2012 and 2013. We're one of the most aggressive states when it comes to offering incentives to companies to help them expand. We're one of the top 10 states for the output of our higher education degrees, meaning we're cranking out a workforce that's got the skill sets that tomorrow's employers are going to need. And we're also a state that knows how to balance its books financially. This is not a state like certain ones across the country that spends more than it takes in. We're a state that balances its books financially, which means we're not going to raise taxes suddenly, and we're not going to cut services suddenly. You know that as running a business, if you let your books get out of control, that means one of two things. You're going to have to cut the quality of your product, or you're going to have to raise the cost to the customers. States are very much the same way if they can't balance their books. Fortunately, Missouri is one of those that can. So, to wrap up, and if that all doesn't work, I love this t-shirt. Missouri loves company. It's a play on the phrase Missouri loves company, in case you didn't get that. But Missouri loves companies. Very much, that's the mission, or that's the message that we want companies to get out there. At this time, hopefully I've left enough time for a couple of questions. I know Sarah's looking at me. Do appreciate everyone's time.
Yeah, a couple quick questions. So if you come up to the mic, that would be great. And Chris Chung, thank you so much.
Sure, thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, right over here. Go ahead and stand up and tell people your name and where you're from and what's your question for Chris Chung.
My question is, where does your revenue come from? Like, does the state pay you when you bring companies in, or like, where does that?
Sure, great question. Well, we're set up as a public-private partnership. That means we've got investors. The public sector is the majority investor. They make their investment essentially through a contract for us to do this work of marketing Missouri and trying to attract companies here. But we also have private sector investors, construction companies, real estate firms, utility companies, the types of private industry that want to see more companies attracted here to this state. But it's not a revenue model so much as they're making an investment in us being able to do our mission.
Last question, go ahead.
My name's Olivia, I'm from Evangel in Springfield. My question is, do you target after certain companies or certain industries based upon the current workforce in Missouri.
Absolutely. Like any of you who are running businesses, you've got target audiences. You know that your product is going to appeal to. It's the same thing here in Missouri. We know that there are going to be certain advantages that we can bring to companies, and we're going to pursue those companies and industries that we believe would be able to capitalize on those advantages. So to answer your question quickly, absolutely, we've got our targets. So with that, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your conference. Really appreciate the opportunity.